This is a download of Farming Today from the BBC. For more information and our terms of use, go to www.bbc.co.uk. The presenter today, Charlotte Smith.
Today, a new industry for Scotland, seaweed farming.
When you're out on the coast at 5 in the morning harvesting seaweed with an onshore gale, you very quickly think, shall I become a chartered accountant or shall I have a little seaweed farm in a tank up a loch somewhere?
We'll talk to the seaweed entrepreneur who's been awarded a UK government grant to promote innovation in agriculture. First, though, a plan to catch 1 million elvers tonight. Fishermen and conservationists will be out on the River Parrett in Somerset, gathering up the young eels this evening. The aim is to help them get past the flood barriers and further upstream, where they can grow into adulthood. Dredging on the river is also due to start today to try to prevent a repeat of this year's floods, so it's also something of a rescue mission. Andrew Carr, chairman of the Sustainable Eel Group, says their task will be made easier because an unusually large number of elvers have returned to the River Parrett from their breeding grounds this year.
A vast quantity has arrived. Last year it was the biggest for 20 years. We haven't yet put a figure on. Twice as good as last year is what's often being said. It's a vast, vast quantity. On the Parrett, we've got a very good team of fishermen who want to work with us to relocate the eels. They are an endangered species and they can't get past the flood defence barriers. So rather than leaving them the wrong side to die, we want to catch them and then move them over the barriers and release them so they can migrate up the freshwaters behind the Parrett.
You are talking about catching 1 million elvers, which seems an awful lot.
1 million elvers is an awful lot, but we really have got this most enormous volume coming into our rivers.
So how many a night do you think you might catch?
A typical fisherman is probably going to catch, shall we say, 25 to 50,000 on a tide or a series of tides.
Obviously, the River Parrett has been the centre of much attention and is about to be dredged any minute in an attempt to alleviate some of the problems caused by the flooding. How has that impacted on the elvers?
The elvers, of course, have really enjoyed the flooding, or the eels as a whole have really enjoyed the flooding, because it enables them to get past all these man-made barriers and get further upstream. But of course, dredging the lower stretches at the same time as the elver recruitment, the elver migration is occurring, will actually damage these endangered fish, no question about it.
So in fact, you are hoping to almost rescue them from the dredging?
Yeah, I think obviously some will get past the dredging, but we'll be able to get a great cohort the other side of the barriers and the other side of the dredging before they get damaged. So yes, it's definitely a rescue mission.
Why has this year been so good for elvers?
Well, the eel is an enigma. We really just don't know is the simple answer. Oceanic factors are generally considered the biggest driver. So temperature and food availability in the Atlantic, as they take up to 2 years or typically 2 years to float across the Atlantic. So the conditions really there is the biggest single factor. And this very warm weather we've had and very wet weather are both extremely good for the last stage of the migration.
Andrew Carr on the enigma of the eel. New figures from the British poultry industry show it sells just over £6 billion worth of products a year and supports 73,000 jobs in the UK. But it also faces challenges. Feed bills are increasing, consumers are price conscious, and animal welfare continues to come under scrutiny. Well, this week on the programme, we'll be examining the state of the chicken industry. The British Poultry Council's members produce more than 90% of UK chicken and turkey. Its chief executive, Andrew Large, says demand is increasing.
The trend is very much that we're selling more and more. If you look at production rates, they've gone up for chicken and also for turkey in recent years. And it's clear that the consumer is demanding more and more poultry meat.
And are they demanding different things from the poultry meat, or does that remain pretty similar?
There's always been a mix of demand. The UK market is generally a market for white meat, so people tend to buy whole birds and breast fillets. So that is where we largely see the demand in the UK market.
There are challenges, though, for farmers, aren't there? We have consumers with limited spending power and yet ever higher feed prices. How are farmers coping with that combination?
If you look at the way prices have moved since 2008, for poultry meat, prices have gone up by 23%, which compares with beef at 51% and lamb at 54%. People in the poultry sector are spending a lot of time and a lot of money looking at the way they can make farming more efficient, looking at the way they can improve yields when the birds are being processed, and that is all fed back to the consumer in terms of more stable prices than for other products.
Does that mean that they compromise on things like welfare?
Oh, absolutely not. The welfare legislation in the UK, most of which is driven by EU law, is very strong. The vast majority of birds in the UK are grown to red tractor standards, so absolutely not. Welfare remains a primary concern for the poultry producer and will always continue to be so.
Now, this is very much a global industry. How does the UK fare, given the global competition with cheap imports, for instance, from places like Thailand?
Well, the UK is a significant trader in poultry products. We import around about 30% of the poultry that we eat in the UK, but we export about 20% of what we produce. So we're a thriving and active participant in the trade. Basically, we are importing products that the UK market wants, so the breast fillets in particular, and we are exporting products like leg quarters, feet and heads and offal that there's less of a demand for in the UK, but there is a demand for overseas.
Now, a few years ago there was much talk about imports, particularly in things like ready meals. Is that still what happens, that it's the cheaper end, if you like, of food which will have imported meat in it?
Generally, imports to the UK, particularly imports from countries like Brazil and Thailand that are major trading partners, will tend to have been on long sea journeys and will have been frozen. And as a result of that, they're more likely to be used in pies and stews and ready meals and so on. So yes, that tends to be the case.
So where are the opportunities for growth then for the poultry industry? Is it let's aim to knock out the imports, or are you concentrating more on exporting more?
It's a combination of export growth, which I think will be necessary to support growth in the UK market. And I think it's also an opportunity for people to come forward with new and innovative products for different markets in the UK. I think one of the chief characteristics of the poultry industry, it's not subsidised by the Common Agricultural Policy, and therefore it's had to rely for its growth on really understanding what the customer is looking for.
Andrew Large. Well, if you're looking for something to cook alongside the chicken, how about seaweed? A project to explore farming seaweed commercially is one of 11 being funded by the first phase of the government's new £70 million agritech catalyst strategy. Both public and private money is being put into a range of research, from combating mastitis in cows to using fungi to control cereal mites. Rory MacPhee is from the Scottish seaweed company Mara, one of the commercial enterprises embarking on research with the Scottish Association for Marine Science. I asked him why, if seaweed can be gathered as it is now, he'd want to farm it.
When you're out on the coast at 5 in the morning harvesting seaweed with an onshore gale, you very quickly think, shall I become a chartered accountant, or shall I have a little seaweed farm in a tank up a loch somewhere?
So is that how you farm seaweed? Outside in water somewhere?
You can do it on ropes in lakes or lochs or lagoons. You can grow it in tanks, or you can grow it in what they call raceways, which are big agitated swimming pools, I guess you'd say. We've chosen the onshore tank method with nice wooden walkways all the way around. You can just lean over and just pick a little bit of seaweed, put it in a bag and send it off to market.
Is it cost effective doing it that way? Because if you go gathering seaweed, cold and miserable as it may be, it is pretty much free.
The way that we grow it, there is no breeding cycle, so we can pick a particular species of seaweed 12 months in a year, whereas in the natural, we're governed by the life cycle, so we can't, for instance, pick during the breeding season. Also, because we can control what the seaweed is fed with, we can make adjustments and come up with a product with the nutrient picture that we're looking for in our foodstuffs.
What scale, then, is seaweed farming at the moment in the UK?
Seaweed farming in the UK is negligible. It's a little bit... The main effort in seaweed farming is in Southeast Asia, China, Japan. For the seed stock, we gather wild seaweed and then we put that in tanks. And, the quality of our wild seaweed is incredibly good in this country. It's just one of those big secrets. We have seaweed wealth. The project that we're doing is really an innovative development, certainly to create an industry in Scotland.
Which is all very well, but where's your market? Because we don't really eat seaweed much, do we?
Well, we don't eat seaweed unless, do you like ice cream, Charlotte? You're eating seaweed when you eat your ice cream. So it's a vegetarian gel, it's a gelatine. And that's seaweed, grown, say, down in Zanzibar or the Indian Ocean. So it's smuggled in a lot to your diet.
But really, you don't just have to develop a way to farm seaweed in this country, you also have to develop a bigger market.
Absolutely. In commercial terms, it's not an easy one to do because, as you rightly point out, we're coming at it from a standing start. However, if you go into health food shops, you'll see packets of seaweed for sale. If you go to Soho, the Japanese shops, there's loads of seaweed in various forms which are eaten.
And how about exports to China? Or is that a stretch too far?
Well, Charlotte, when I'm on a street corner in Japan counting the money I've just sold to the local Japanese supermarket of Scottish seaweed, I will give you a call and you will detect the joy in my voice.
Seaweed entrepreneur Rory MacPhee. Now, for the first time, at least as far as we know, we are going to be recording an edition of Farming Today in front of a live audience. The Farming Today team, in all our glory, will be in the BBC radio tent at the Bristol Food Connection Festival on Saturday, the 3rd of May. And if you want to join us, you would be very welcome. You can apply for tickets now on the BBC website. Just search for Be On A Show. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer in Bristol was Sarah Swadling.